Greetings. This is the HR simulation that you guys will be doing. It's by the same company that did the simulation for Management 430. This one, though, deals very specifically with the selection process and how you are going to determine your budget, determine your recruiting and selection plan, and then implementing that plan to get a certain return on investment. So this slideshow and this little movie is going to take you through the process step by step, how to set up your budget, and then ultimately how to use the simulation to do your hiring decisions. When you enter the simulation, once you have permission to do so, you will see a menu system very similar to what you experienced in Management 430. Along the left-hand side, you see all of your navigation options in terms of documentations, the selection process itself, the candidates you're choosing, and then the selection devices you're choosing. So those are all your menu choices along the left-hand side. Across the top, you have an option to have a back screen, to go to the main menu, to print, and to log off. Don't worry about the industry, firm, and budget information. That's just summarized up there for you, but you're all going to be in the same industry, in the same firm. You're not specifically competing against each other. So each one of you individually will go through this simulation. This is not a team exercise, but each of you have to individually do this. So you'll open up into the first screen, and it talks about developing a selection method. You'll see something like that. Your main menu on the left-hand side, as you get into the sim selection, you'll see, as I said, on the left-hand side, documentation, selection process, candidates, and selection devices. So it's always good to start with the documentation first. The documentation gives you all the background information that you need to be able to understand what is going on. When you go into the documentation, the first link under documentation goes to introduction. And that, as I said, gives you all the background information that you need to figure out what your selection process is going to look like. So you'll also find the manual, which I'll upload into the website. We'll also have that information too. So what you see here is a background on Juniper Hotels, what they do, what is the procedure that they've currently used for their selection process, and what do you have available to you to be able to do your staffing plan. All right. If you go on the link underneath documentation where it says job description, then you'll get the very detailed job description for the front office manager, which is the position that you're hiring for, and you have to hire 3 candidates to accept the job. And there will be 3 people that will accept the job. You may have some people that reject the position, the job offer, and they'll give you some reasons why. But assuming that you've done everything right, you should get 3 candidates who accept your job offer. So it includes your position summary, what you can generally expect in terms of the position, then the job duties and responsibilities, et cetera, and whether or not it involves in supervision, the KSA is involved, all those things. As you continue moving down, you'll see where it says the selection process, and the first menu under selection process is options and costs. So here they'll tell you all the different options that you have for developing your selection system. And you have you can recruit on college campuses, or you can recruit walk-in candidates. You can travel, or you can have people just come to you. There are all sorts of different options, interviews, assessment tests, all of the things that we've talked about in Module 3 with respect to assessing external candidates, because that's you're hiring at an entry level here in the hotel, and so you're really only going to be hiring external candidates for this position. The next submenu under selection process is your previous approach that Juniper Hotels used. And they have all sorts of estimated costs attached to that, what they did in order to get 3 job offers. And basically their total estimated costs in the past was $6,500. Now, you might argue they did a great job, they decreased their costs, or they had low costs, but they also had candidates that did not perform well or stay with the company for a long period of time. So your goal is to find better candidates with higher performance who are willing to stay for 3 years at least to recoup your costs. And so it's okay to spend a little bit more money than $6,500. It's actually what you're encouraged to do. So what you're trying to do in this, as it says there on the left-hand side, is improve the quality of the hires and the return on investment, which means you need to get higher quality hires, which means you have to pay more money. But the assumption is by paying more money for better candidates, you're going to end up with a greater return on your investment in the long run anyway. The next item underneath your selection process is actually setting up your selection budget. Before the simulation begins, you have to figure out what your goals are in terms of hiring, in terms of what tools you're going to use, how you're going to recruit people, what schools you're going to recruit from, what assessments you're going to use, what assessments you'll use on site, what assessments you'll use on campus. So you've got all sorts of options in there, and the options basically come down to 2 college campuses, and you've got recruiters and the cost to send the recruiters there. You've got the cost for the types of assessments you do when you're on campus. You also have the option to hire walk-in candidates. And so if you have walk-in candidates who have dropped off resumes, you don't have to go to a recruiting trip for them. You only have to assess them on site if you think they are good enough. What I need you to do for the purpose of your assignment is to determine your budget, to determine your flow and what your plan is for hiring. Are you going to recruit on campus? If so, which resume books do you want? If you're going to only use walk-in candidates, understand the trade-off with that and explain why you're using each one of those sources. Walk-in candidates, there's a strength and a weakness to using them. It can be quicker to get them up to speed, but if you need high-quality candidates, you're not necessarily going to be able to control the quality of the candidates who come in. When we recruit on college campuses, you've got a bunch of options, and you've got some campuses that have a good educational system and other campuses that have a lesser quality educational system, and your job is to determine which resume book is important, or if both resume books are important. You don't have to limit yourself to one. I certainly encourage you to use all 3 sources if you can. And so in your assignment, your first assignment is you're going to set up your selection budget in the simulation. And then you're going to tell me what selection tools you use. You're going to tell me what schools you're going to recruit from, what is your recruiting method. Are you going to use a multiple hurdle approach, or are you going to use a cumulative approach where strengths in one area counterbalance weaknesses in the other, and so you have all these choices to make. As I'll get into the assignment itself in a separate document that'll go through the details, but this information here in terms of determining what your selection budget is, this is all part of that selection system. I don't want you at this time to select your budget and input this, because once you input it, you cannot go back and change your budget. What I want you to do is develop your plan first, and I want you to submit your plan to me, and then I'm going to give you feedback on your plan. And then once your plan is approved, or I make suggestions about how to improve it, you're going to take that improved plan, and then you're going to input that into your selection budget here. And so, because like I said, once you submit it, you're locked into it. Obviously, your budget, you can exceed your budget, but you have to be able to justify that in your paper why you exceeded your budget. You can be under your budget, that's fine too. At a minimum, you want to do at least what your budget said to do. If you need to go over, it's fine, but you need to be able to justify why you went over. For example, if you decided to only use one school's resume books and your walk-in candidates, and you decided after a while that you wanted to do an additional resume book, now you have to go back. It's going to cost you more money. to be able to go through, screen those applicants, and go through the whole selection process with them as well. So, as I said, review your website, learn about what goes into your selection budget, learn about the job, learn about what's expected for it. Then I want you to, before you input anything, write up your selection process, get it approved by me. Once it's approved, or I provide feedback to get it approved, you implement that feedback and input it into your selection, and then you can proceed with your hiring process. So as you see here, particularly in that bottom right-hand corner, once you have finalized your budget, you will not be able to change it. This is true. So you don't want to go through and input everything until you get your final approval from me on your hiring process. And once you get that final approval on your hiring process, then you can go in and do all your inputs. So what you'll see here on your selection budget is the number of resume books that you want, and there you have a couple of options on that. The number of recruiters you want to go to on-campus trips, and then what you're going to do for your on-site trips. And then once you're done, you hit submit, finalizing your budget, okay, you hit okay, and then you proceed through for the rest of the stuff. But remember, you do not input your selection budget until I have approved your selection plan. The slideshow here, and perhaps in spots in the simulation, it refers to a team leader. And again, this is only relevant if you are doing this as a team, which you will not be doing. You're doing this as an individual project, so don't worry about the references to team leaders and things like that. Once you have finalized your budget, you'll get a notice like you see here. You have completed the budgeting process. You may now proceed with the selection process. Under the candidates menu on the left, you can purchase resume books and review resumes from the two universities, and you can review the unsolicited resumes, which are your walk-in resumes. So all of that is listed. So once you're done with the budget, you go to where it says candidates, and you decide, you select your pool of candidates, Northern University, Western University, and unsolicited or walk-in candidates. As you can see on the left-hand side, once you look at Northern University, for example, you'll see the book, and you'll be given the option to purchase the resume book. You will not be allowed to see the resumes until you purchase the resume book. So the resume book is $100. Basically, that's the cost for the organization to access job candidates or job applicants from different universities. And typically these are going to be people who are interested in jobs in hospitality, because this is a book targeted for the hospitality industry. So you select the resume book that if you want it, and then you purchase it, and then that goes into your actual costs. So your budgeted costs are just the estimate of what you expect to spend, and the actual costs are what you actually end up doing. And the goal is, of course, is you'd like to match what you budgeted. And sometimes realistically you can do that. And sometimes after you've budgeted, you realize you either have to spend more or you don't need to spend as much. It's important to make sure you're clear what it is that you want to do in advance before you submit your budget, because once you start doing that, then all your actual expenses start to add up, and you want to make sure you've got a good solid plan in place before you proceed. Once you've looked at the resumes from Northern University, Western University, and the unsolicited pool, assuming that you choose all three of those, you then have the option to look at all of the candidates. As you can see there's a whole bunch of them listed from top to bottom. I think the first one that you see circled there is like Ada Collins or something like that. But I also see a Sergio Gomez and a Scott Merrick and a Sean Reed and a Peter Smith, assuming that my vision is actually good enough to see that. And again, you have the option, if you look on the right-hand side, to select the ones that you want. All the way on the far right, you see add in that last column. The ones that you've had a chance to look at the resume book, then you choose the ones that you want in your applicant pool, and those get added into the applicant pool. And then the very bottom thing under candidates is your selected pool. That's the pool of people that you'll be working off of. Remember, your unsolicited people, you don't have on-campus visits with them. You only have on-campus visits with those who are on a college campus. The unsolicited bypass that step in the process, and you only have them come on site to interview with you if you think they're good enough. So this gives you a really great example of what the resume looks like. So in your pool, as you open up Northern University, you get that screen that you saw on the previous slide that has all the names, and then on the far right-hand side, you see where it says add in the last column. If you click on each name, you will see their resume pops up. So you can see what their career objective is, what their degree is, where they go to school, any work experience they have, any KSAs that they can bring to the table. So you can review slowly each one of those candidates and their resumes to decide which one you want to add to your pool. As I said from the previous two slides, the name column towards the left has all the names, and if you click on it, it's a hot link to their resume. The resume pulls up. Once you've reviewed it, you've decided that you want to consider them, then you go to the right-hand side, click Add, and that adds them to your pool. After you've clicked on and added the applicants that you're interested in putting into your pool, if you go down to the candidate menu, go down to selected pool, you'll then see every candidate you've added into your pool, and that includes from Northern, Western, and unsolicited resumes. So Ada Collins, as you see, shows up in there. You can always remove her later if you want to, but right now she's in there. It tells you that she's from Northern, and it gives you information on what selection tools you've used and how you've gone from there. Once you have selected your pool, you go down to your selective devices and you have options on-site, off-site, on campus, and then ultimately the last thing is making offers down there. So what we're going to do first of all is address the on-campus interview pool, because if you choose both campuses, Northern and Western, you have to go through a screening process with all of those applicants. And so you first go to your on campus, then you click on the university where you're going to be doing, if you've purchased the books, you have the right then to go on campus. You click on Northern University, and then you make a decision about what selection tools and what selection process you'll use when you're at the college campus. So you can have one hurdle that just includes all the interviews and all the tests and that come all at once, or you can have a multiple hurdle approach where the first hurdle is the interview, and if they pass the interview, then they get to do the test, and if they pass the test, then they get to come to the on-site interview process. So you decide how you want to handle that. And just remember, go back to our lecture material where we talked about the initial assessment tools that we used and the substantive assessments that we use once people become job candidates, and then ultimately what we do in order to be able to make a contingent offer to people down the line. And so keep that in mind, what you want that mix to look like. Once you've clicked on the school and you are setting up what your on-campus trip will look like, you have to decide which tools you want to use and how you want to handle the hurdles. You will have the option to set up multiple hurdles if you want to, or you can set up one hurdle and then have all that data, and then you can make the determination based on that collective data which applicants are going to use. I am going to suggest that you utilize your the lessons learned in the measurement chapter to demonstrate how you determined which candidate would be good. And if you're going to use a more comprehensive measure where, high performance in one area, compensates, the compensatory model compensates for lower performance in another area, how did you determine, the weightings of the different criteria and things like that? And you'll see that in the written assignment, that will have different weightings for the criteria that you used in the on-campus hurdles. And then once everybody comes on site, whoever you're choosing to bring on site, your candidates, what hurdles did you use there? And again, how were those weighted when you made your final decision? The things that you have available to you on campus is the structured or unstructured interviews, your cognitive ability test, a written test regarding, I think, job knowledge, and personality test. So those are the things you have available to do on campus. You cannot do more than that. There are different things that you can do when you bring people on site, but this is what you're limited to on the college campuses: structured or unstructured interviews, cognitive, written, and personality tests. And again, remember, when you're doing your budget, your walk-in candidates don't get college visits, so you don't have to interview them more than on site. When you are coming up with your budget and you're doing on-campus interviewing as well as on-site interviewing, you've got to account for all the things that you do on the on-campus locations on top of the on-site locations. But your walk-in candidates don't have those pre-resumes that need to be visited and managed in a college campus visit. So you'll click on setting up the hurdle, and you'll notice, first of all, on the left-hand side in the upper corner, all of the candidates that you selected from Northern University. It's Michael Phillips, Ada Collins, Sergio Gomez, Martin, looks like Grinnell, Thomas Vandenbroek, Olivia Fernandez, Dominic Wu, and Scott, is it Merrick or Masick? I don't know. I can't see it. It's just too small for my eyeballs. So you'll have those candidates there, and then on the right-hand side, you will choose the interviews or tests that you want to conduct at that time. So click on all of them. It's a radio button, so just click on the ones that you want, and you can say, this is what I want in this hurdle. So again, if you're going to have multiple hurdles while on the college campus, that's fine. Just remember, it could be a little bit more costly and may take you more time. The other option is, as I said, have everything that you want to do in just one hurdle and use a more of a compensatory approach to things. Be aware of your costs. See at the bottom, across the bottom of the screen, you will have all the costs down there in front of you. So make sure that you are assuming how many you have and how many interviews you're going to do and what the cost will be. Now here again goes into the challenge when you're creating your budget. You don't know how many resumes you're going to get in the resume book. You don't even know how many of them you're going to want to interview. You're going to have to make your best guess at how many you think you want to bring on. Now let's say you budgeted for 10, but you like 12. Can you go over your budget? Of course you can go over your budget, but you have to justify why you went over budget, if you understand where I'm getting at there. So just be careful of the overall costs of what you're going to be doing, and keep track of what you budgeted and how it compares. Oftentimes we assume that we will have more candidates than we really will, or we might underestimate how many candidates we think we're going to get. And you may end up with way more that you thought are going to be good. So try to just do your best in terms of determining an estimate of how many you think you'll get from each resume book. So once you are satisfied with all of the selection devices you're going to use in a particular hurdle, you click on the button and you process it. Remember, once you click on it, your choices cannot be changed. So that's why I encourage you, before you even input your budget into the simulation, that you have your plan in place and you know what you're going to be doing, so that you can try to follow your plan and your budget as tightly as possible. So again, once you decide what you're going to do, input it, hit send, and your choices cannot change at that point in time. Once you've determined your on-site step, your on-campus steps, you have to determine your on-site steps. Basically what that means is once you have selected people from the college campuses, which ones you now want to bring to the hotel for interviews and other selection assessments, you have to develop what that hurdled approach will look like. And again, what you have available to you here are all the same things, except we also add a simulation. So we can't really do simulations, and we certainly wouldn't want the cost of a simulation when we're doing pre-screening. But when we have our candidates that we think are really good, that's when we want to spend the money for the simulation test. Do you want to give the simulation to every single person you bring on site? That's up to you. That's up to you and whether or not you have a multiple hurdle or a compensatory approach. If you do a compensatory approach, everybody gets every selection tool. If you are doing a multiple hurdle approach, then you might choose to only use the simulation as your last hurdle and only to the last candidates who you wanted to see would make good finalists. And so you start with, again, structured and unstructured interviews, cognitive ability tests, written job knowledge tests, personality tests, and your simulation. And again, you decide how many hurdles you want and what you want in each hurdle. And it's up to you to set that up. So here's the same thing as we discussed for the on-campus hurdles. Same sort of thing. You have the list of the tests that you want to do, and whether or not they will take, what kind of interview they'll have, what kind of structure or unstructured, how many interviews they're going to do, how many selection tests you're going to have them do, whether or not you're going to have them do the simulation. You can set it up so that you can have one interview or test per hurdle, and they have to pass each hurdle, or you can have everything in one hurdle. So you have the choice to do that, whether it's one giant compensatory hurdle or whether it'll be multiple hurdles step by step, and you can set it up that way. So once you've set up your hurdles, you implement in the simulation, and the simulation automatically does the information for you. For example, it'll automatically tell you what the results are from your multiple hurdles. It'll tell you what your results are for the selection results. So how they do in the simulation, how they do in the interview, et cetera, et cetera. So you will have your, you go to your job offer window, which is on the left-hand side. You'll see all the applicants that you you are interested in, that they have made it through each hurdle and the step of the process. Then that's, you have to manually go in and click on the ones you like and want to keep in the process and get rid of the ones you don't want. It'll tell you who they are, where they're from, and how they performed on all the tests. And then once you've assessed that and you've come up with your determination for who's going to be the best candidate, you click on the right-hand side which ones you're going to make an offer to. Don't assume because you make an offer that they're going to accept it. So you click it, and then they will tell you whether or not they accept the offer. You may have to make the offer for more than one time to people. Ideally, you make 3 offers, you get 3 acceptances, and that would be the goal when it comes to those yield ratios, as we've talked about. But if not, then you may have to do more offers in order to get the 3 high-quality candidates that you want. And just to reinforce here, it is not guaranteed that each candidate will accept your job. You will, if the candidate does not accept your job, you'll see a little red box that pops up that will tell you why they are rejecting the job, and you should take note of why that is, and decide you know, if that would change your selection in the future. So as part of your write-up, you're going to tell me if you had candidates that you didn't accept the job, why didn't they accept the job and what you would do differently. But ultimately, you should have enough people that will accept the job, and then you hit make offer, make offer, make offer. They accept it, and then you will be ready to go. As I said, once you get 3 candidates to accept your job offers, then your simulation ends. And then ultimately we will get your return on investment to you so that you can write up your final paper and have that submitted by the end of class. This simulation is a lot easier than the Management 430 simulation. It's very narrow in its scope, and it's pretty user-friendly. And it's something that you can easily do by yourself. The selection devices here, there you can see across the top of the menu, there's a help button. So if you have any problem, for example, this person wasn't sure about how to make a job offer, so the help button comes up and it tells you what you need to do at that step of the process or in this certain stage in the menu. So, this, for example, says, this is what it means to make a job offer. You have to click the button to the right of the candidate, choose the 3 that you want. Once they accept it, then you'll get you'll get feedback from me on your return on investment for your applicants. So the few things to keep in mind, as it says here, recruiting and selection is a process, which means it's a step-by-step process. You have to come up with your budget and your plan. You have to implement your plan. You have to recruit. You get your subset of applicants that you want to interview or to give more substantive assessment tools to. You have to then choose which ones you want to bring on site for selection assessment there. And then ultimately hire. So it is not something that's done in one blink. It is done through a long time and a long step in the process of from beginning to end. Determining what your plan is and ultimately getting somebody to accept a job offer. Make sure you read all of the information carefully. Make sure you're clear about what your strategy and process is as you reflect it in your budget. So I would look for a flow diagram from you step by step. I want to know what your step-by-step process is going to be before you input anything into the simulation. You're welcome to access the simulation. You're welcome to look around in it, but I do not want you to input anything until you get the final approval from me that your plan is sound and that what you're going to do makes sense. Only don't worry about the team leader thing because you are all your individual team leaders, and don't underestimate the importance of being organized in the way that you approach this. And the teamwork, as I said, the teamwork's not relevant there. You are trying to discriminate, but you're trying to discriminate using job-related criteria, not non-job-related criteria. You want to be careful that you're not discriminating against women and minorities in the process. So be mindful of that because it's going to be pretty clear from names, from resumes, whether people are male or female, or perhaps what their ethnic background is. You can make some pretty good assumptions based on that. So you have to be careful to do that. Part of your process is I'm going to be looking at your flow statistics to see whether or not you're going to be asked to calculate your flow statistics, so you can let me know based on how many applied for the job, how many did you end up hiring, and do you have a representativeness, in your hiring rate? So we'll have some fun with some of those statistics too. Anyway, if you have any questions, let me know, and I look forward to working with you on this simulation.